Try now.
Barnes Barn. Someone hold the mic?
I wanted to. What did you say?
I have to hold the mic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have mic stands yet. I haven't invested in that. As you'll notice, it's pretty low budget here.
That's good.
I wanted to start recording. I mean, we'll be slow at it, and I can always edit out any of the stuff in the beginning, but I just wanted to capture all the gold we were talking about before we started recording.
Fair enough.
Hi.
Hi, Zach.
You tightened up on me, buddy.
What are you going to do?
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. It's a really nice day in Santa Fe.
I know. I thought it was going to be too cold to sit outside.
Oh, yeah. No, this is it.
It's perfect.
Tonight is the switching the clocks, and it's just going to
Is
get
that
dark
tonight?
and cold. Yeah. So
Bummer.
it's my second year living up here, and I love the weather. I can't get enough of it.
It's a real winter, though.
It's a real winter. Yeah. Last year we got snow right after Halloween, and then it was like winter after that.
Yep.
And that's, we're from places that have four seasons.
Are you from New York or Chicago?
No, I'm from Jamestown, New York.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a small town south of Buffalo.
Okay.
We're famous for Lucille Ball.
Wait, who's Lucille Ball?
Oh my God.
Who
One of
is
the most
it?
famous comedians of all time.
Oh, comedian.
Yeah. She actress.
Lucille
Actress,
reminds
comedian.
me.
Love Lucy. The show I Love Lucy.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then the 10,000 Maniacs.
I have heard
and
that.
Natalie Merchant. That's also before your time.
I'm kind of showing my youth here. I'm embarrassed by this, actually.
That's okay. I'm showing my age.
I know Lucille from Arrested Development.
No, look it up. She's almost as famous as it gets. So.
Yeah, I feel bad about that. But congratulations, you're from the same hometown as Lucille Ball.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made it out.
Do people not?
For sure.
Yeah, that's
It's a classic Rust Belt town.
Yep.
Factories, clothes.
Yep.
A lot of poverty. People feel kind of dead end there a little bit. They used to be like that. It's a lot of reinvention, post-industrialization,
Yep.
reinvention kind of stuff.
How did you make it out?
I left on a Greyhound with $150 in my pocket. I went to California where my mom lived, and I lived on her couch for a while. Got a job as a cook. I was a cook when I left.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just made my way from there. Went to Fresno, California, and then...
Oof.
Yeah. Not an easy place to be.
No disrespect to Fresno.
It's hot. It's a victim of sprawl. It was completely different than where I grew up. And I didn't like it very much. Mm-hmm. I had a hard time living there. I felt a little bit like a fish out of water, so I was a young, radical punk rocker, and I wanted to go be around more of those kinds of people, so I went to Olympia, Washington after that. And I got a job cooking in the place where all the hipsters came to get bagels and breakfast and lunch, and it was like it was different than anything I'd ever been around. I volunteered at the food co-op. I worked 3 days a week, rode a bicycle everywhere. It was like I lived mostly as an activist during that time.
This is something that I wanted to get into, and I thought we were going to get into much later on in the cast. But you are one of the more... Actually, no. You're probably the most... Well, you're one of the biggest wine personalities that I've ever met. You are unapologetically yourself, but also you operate on a day-to-day basis with a very firm set of ethics, principles, morality. And I don't think I've known you long enough to really define exactly what those boundaries are, and what those ethics and morality are. I think I know them in terms of wine and how, but yeah, what are those ethics and morality that you live by, and where'd you pick them up?
I define ethics and morality, it's politics, right? Like,
Okay.
politics is like the polis, the public, you know. I look at politics as like everything. Politics is everything. How you live, how you react, how you act towards people. You know, I consider myself like a socialist or a libertarian socialist, more in the like anarchist, from the anarchist school of thought.
Yeah.
I think people should do whatever the fuck they want to do, but at the same time, I try to live an ethical life, and I believe in cooperation more than I believe in competition. You know, I value collectivity, you know, community-oriented way of living, you know. I don't believe I, like, perfectly enact, like, my politics. I have a lot of responsibilities in my life and only so much time in the day, and, you know, being a 46-year-old, you know, I think, like, activism and radical politics are really a young man's game, you know, in a lot of ways. But I picked them up really in Fresno, California, you know. Before that, definitely, like, when I was a kid, I was really into Public Enemy, NWA, Fight the Power, anti-racism. I was always anti-homophobic, anti-sexist. You know, I had those politics when I was 12 years old. And
From your folks?
no, from music.
Okay.
Yeah. From like Public Enemy and Queen Latifah and, you know, hip hop.
Cool.
And then I found indie rock and like bands like Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. and then I found like that DIY ethos of punk rock, do it yourself, make your own zines, you know, make your own record label, do everything yourself, DIY. And so I became very involved with the DIY punk rock scene and then DIY hip hop, you know, and I've always kind of gone between the two before I kind of like made wine and food my main thing, but I always cooked or I always worked in a restaurant, you know, during that time. And I worked in like some, you know, I worked at Food Not Bombs. I worked in a radical collective that served food in Olympia, Washington. I did a lot of things back then, you know, that kind of like that ethos really came back to me because I kind of became consumed by wine and food and New York City in my late 20s, early 30s, and into my mid 30s.
You had the foundation of cooking in Fresno?
I cooked in restaurants from my hometown, some fine dining, and I did, you know, fast a la plancha stuff. Yeah, I've cooked breakfast a lot. I've cooked in a lot of fine dining restaurants, you know, mainly Italian food, which was my kind of obsession when I was young. I wanted to learn everything Italian. But like when Trump got elected, it was like this huge wake-up call. My kid was maybe, you know, 2 or 3 at the time, and he was 3. And I just started to think about, like, what are my values? What do I believe in, really, like, in my core, you know? And so I've been just, like, since then, I've been sort of working it out, you know? I have a lot of aspirations, but you know.
Yeah. Wait, should we open this wine, by the way? Because I don't want to get too deep into this conversation before we...
Probably need some wine to talk.
Yeah. Do you have a key?
I do.
All right, cool. And also, can you introduce yourself? We started talking about deep shit, and then I forgot to have you introduce yourself. So we'll just cut all that. Just kidding.
I'm Chris Barnes. I'm the national sales manager for Jose Pastor Selections. I've been in this job for 12 years. I'm a dad to William. I'm a cat dad.
Shout out
Rose.
William.
I'm a partner to Hallie. Haletta.
Shout out Hallie.
I'm a passionate wine, food, music enthusiast, politics stuff. So we got a new Bay Miraflores here, 2023, from Ramiro Ibanez, one of my favorite projects in the land of sherry, Andalusia, specifically Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which is where they make manzanilla. So it's Miraflores is a pago, or a district of wine that's been designated for, hundreds of years. And Ramiro is one of these, a young maverick winemaker that is bringing these sort of sophisticated still wines back to, back from the dead, essentially. This was a prominent wine style before the wines from this area started being fortified.
Aged underfloor.
A little bit. It's mostly topped off when there's some aging underfloor towards the end of the élevage. And the fermentation in the élevage is in sherry casks. So there's... Yeah, sorry, dude. I've left all my double hinged. Last one I left at Santa Fe Wine Chili. I'm also one of the co-founders of Derive, which is this lovely glass here, an awesome wine fair that we hope to duplicate next year. We had our first one back in June. Zach participated.
That was June, huh?
It was June.
Feels like longer.
Feels like a long time ago. It's weird.
It was so good, man. It was such an amazing turnout, cool venue.
Well, a lot of credit goes to Martha and Paul and Hallie. Yeah. I pitched in. I felt like I was sort of bogged down a little bit by work, but other stuff. But
I didn't even pick that up. Honestly, I wouldn't have.
Oh, it's just the organizing of the event.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't. I'm a co-founder. I'm saying I'm giving a lot of the credit to those.
Yeah.
Martha particularly and Hallie did a lot of work. So
cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks for doing this.
This is a pale golden.
You gonna blind it?
That smells pretty good.
Yeah, it's delicious. Okay, so then if you are at that point in your life getting into food and wine, cooking, you moved to New York.
No. I went from Olympia to Portland.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of went quickly, right into the rat race. I had a lot of aspirations to be a cook. I worked at a big Italian restaurant with this kind of local celebrity chef. And I sort of grinded myself down pretty quickly. I fell in love with this woman, and then I moved to Chicago. She was a native Portlander, and she just wanted to keep moving. And so I was like, sure, I'm down for adventure, So we went to Chicago, and I lived there between 01 and 05.
Okay.
And in Portland, I was doing a lot of hip-hop DJing and cooking, and I took that to Chicago, and I worked in kitchens in front of the house.
When does the connection with wine come in? When did you start to get curious about wine?
I took a job at a coffee shop, and they had coffee education. They were very into the origins, how things tasted, and everybody on the staff knowing the different coffees.
Yeah.
And tea, same. And that's when the light bulb went off for me. That's when I realized that I am good at facing with people, talking, because I never really had a job in the public. I had a record store job for about 6 months in Portland, and I realized that I was really into curation because I was a buyer. And then so I had the curation thing, and then I could taste, describe, and tell stories and make friends.
Okay.
And I realized that I could do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, shit. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I really was by the seat of my pants, no college, no plan. Didn't want to be a part of the mainstream of America. I felt a lot of camaraderie in restaurants and coffee shops, and loved that. But I'm also kind of a workaholic. I take on more work always, it seems like, than, and I always had 2 jobs. So I took a job at a fancy food store that had a very good wine department that really was very good for basics, like blue chip. You want to know the good Gruner Veltliner from Austria. You want to know who the great Nebbiolo producer is. You want to know who the great Chateauneuf de Pop producer is.
All right, ready on 3, say your favorite Austrian Gruner producer. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Nikolaev.
I was going to say Nikolai Hoff.
Yeah,
okay.
Nice.
But I've been there, and it was...
I know, I wish that I had gone.
Yeah. I don't know if I can say that now, but I'm a little out of touch. But
I'm sorry.
I might have a different answer for you.
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
It's okay.
What would your answer be? Sorry.
No, it's Nikolai Hoff was the first thing that came to my brain.
Yeah.
So I'll just go with that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But we had like awesome charcuterie, all this stuff. We brought all this stuff from New York, Salumeria, Bilese, like, 8 different kinds of prosciutto, 15 different kinds of salamis, and I kind of made my niche the charcuterie department.
Oh.
And we did hand-cut smoked salmon, and I was so into that precision, because I came from kitchens. I was into the precision cutting, facing with the customers, talking, and then when we were slow, I would go over to the wine department, and I would talk to Ashley and Mark Roble, and they would teach me, and I would read books that she told me to read, and she would teach me about wine, and I would take home at every shift a bottle of wine, read about it. And so I started to learn the basics of wine there, and I started to really explore Chicago gastronomically. I would ride my bicycle around, go to Vietnamese restaurants, Manny's Deli, or like different places that started to like form. I'm like, I am enthusiastic about this. It's adventure. It's intellectual. It's sensorial. I became friends with the chef, and like we went to Chicago or New York together, and New York just like blew my mind, So I decided to go to culinary school there.
Yeah.
And I was in my late 20s, 27, 28 years,
Sounds like it was also a social thing for you too, because you mentioned I was able to, with coffee, I'm able to taste it, describe it, tell a story, and then make friends from that as well. I think about that. I think about that all the time. That seems to be a through line with everybody that I've interviewed for this, but then also just everybody that you chat with that is in this industry. That's my whole social group, really, is people that drink wine or people that eat really good food, people that are intentional with food. Like, I don't know how people make friends outside of, like, if I didn't have wine and food, I don't know how I would make friends. It's my entire social group. It seems to be the through line for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, my colleagues are my closest friends to this day.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Daryl Grivey, someone I know outside of wine. We were roommates in Chicago in 2001 and 2002 and 3 and 4. I mean, we like lived in a bunch of places together. We were like kind of doing our 20s together, and he got a job at a wine bar after I left Chicago, and then he came to New York when I was in New York. I got him a job at Terroir Wine Bar, and now he's a sales manager for Rosenthal in the Midwest.
Oh shit, nice.
Like this stuff, it's like you get into it, and it just becomes kind of, it becomes kind of our safe space. People we're weirdos. It's a weird subculture. Like, we sort of live off biting the hand that feeds a little bit. You develop a taste for these things, and like, what do? Go back?
No.
It's not easy to do that.
No.
I mean, sure, I definitely have, nostalgia for Wonder Bread mustard and bologna sandwiches.
I was just having a conversation about this yesterday, except not mustard and ketchup instead of mustard.
Oof.
It's bad.
Yeah,
it's
ketchup.
bad.
Yeah.
But I kind of there is nostalgia there. I'll still have one every now and then.
That taste memory, I've been embracing it more lately.
What is a pairing for that?
Gruner Veltliner. Riesling. Why not? I mean, really, it's not that far off from, real mortadella.
If it's Dijon
and a soft bread. There's nothing wrong with a soft bread. Everything doesn't have to be like a crusty, perfect European loaf.
This is going to be my next food and wine pairing is like Grand Cru white burgundy with a bologna, mustard, and Wonder Bread sandwich.
Do it.
If it's Dijon, it could work, actually.
Why not?
Yeah. So I have questions here that I wrote down on my way in.
Cool.
My first one that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
What the fuck is spoof?
Spoof is a terminology developed by a few different of my elders. Michael Wheeler, David Lilly, Joe Dresner, Harmon Skarnick. These are people that use the word spoof, and they were using these to describe wines that are made with a lot of additives that are trying to be something, but what the essence of wine is a product of the planet. So a spoof wine is like a wine that's aspirational to fit, particularly my era, it was to fit a flavor profile that critics would like, particularly Robert Parker.
New French oak.
New French
Lots
oak, enzymes, chaptalization, acidification, yeast foods, all these manipulations that used to make wine that clean and typical, or some of these manipulations were more common in the Parker era.
Mm-hmm.
Whole entire wine regions and countries define themselves by this one single man's taste and 100-point system, and a lot of people don't realize because it's not as powerful.
Yeah.
But when I came in the business almost around 20 years ago, that was the main influence.
Well, dude, I think about, and I've only had these wines one time, but the Gigal Lalas, that seems like a perfect example of the Parker influence on an entire region. Those wines spend 4 years in 100% new French oak. And when I go to drink, it's a very sought after wine.
You had to call him out, huh? Gigal, he's going to come after you, man. He's got people.
Well, damn. I know I should think of, I've had some Gigal that I really, really enjoy.
Sure.
And these are really sought after wines. Super expensive. And yeah, single vineyard, Northern Rhone Syrah. That
does it taste like Syrah?
No, that's the thing. For me, it's like it's an oak bomb. It's an oak vanilla bomb. But I get worried sometimes. Like, I have some friends that have grown up and drink now big California wines, and I really enjoy every now and then a big California wine.
So do I.
But I fear sometimes when people are trained on that and they smell and they taste new oak all of the time, that when they go to drink, let's say like Catherine and Pierre single vineyard Bourgogne, there is no toast and vanilla from new oak in those wines. So when someone that has only drank wine with new oak puts their nose in that glass, that wine to them is automatically missing something. Like, it doesn't have, it's like, what the fuck, this is even wine,
Mm-hmm.
But it's because they're associating a flavor additive, basically, that is not necessarily, that oftentimes masks a lot of the flavors of these grapes, I don't know. I just wanted to go on a soapbox there, but it freaks me out a little bit, actually. Like,
it's when I got out of the oak soup expression of wine that's when what made me want to be into wine.
yeah.
I was working as a manager at a coffee place up in Evanston, Illinois, and I'd go to the Whole Foods next door, and I bought this little cheap Counoise from a producer called Domaine Montpertuis, who's a Chateauneuf de Pop producer. There's no longer makes wine. But I turned around the back label, and it had a Rosenthal Wine Merchant's back label, and on the back it had this whole diatribe about authenticity and how he selected wine, and I read it, and I was just like, weird, like, and then I found a Dolcetto from him, and I started like really exploring native Italian varieties, and that's like. And these aren't wines that show any kind of oak. And I just started like, the flavors seem to come from the grapes themselves. And, and then I went to New York, and I was at French Culinary Institute, and I was cooking at this place called August Restaurant, which is a RIP amazing. It was a regional European was the cuisine. And there was a guy there named Ryan Ibsen who pointed me in the direction of Chamber Street wines.
Oh, yeah.
And Ryan Ibsen ended up becoming the wine director for the Bestia group in LA for a long time. But that guy, he pointed me towards Chamber Street, and I went there, and I started meeting growers. I met Pierre Breton there. And
he's
it was
stateside.
In that tasting at Chamber Street in the old firehouse where Pierre Breton was holding court. On
I've
the
heard
right
wild
side in
stories
the back of the place, and he's just like drinking and talking, and I was like, who is this guy? He's a real character. But at that time I really fell for Cabernet Franc,
Yeah. Yep.
and I didn't realize that it had a name, but basically this was a natural wine tasting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I became obsessed with that shop, and when I graduated culinary school, I ran into the owner's daughter at a hipster bar in the East Village, and I went up to her and said, how do I get a job where you work? And she goes, oh, well, I think we're hiring right now.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I went home, woke up with a little bit of a hangover, made my resume, went down to Chamber Street, and I guess she had told her dad about me, so he was quasi expecting me.
Uh-huh.
But I handed my resume up to David Lilly on the stairs awkwardly, because there was a 2-story, there was a firehouse, and there was a second story where the offices were. And he talks to me a little bit, and he goes, so like, what's your experience, blah, 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 what wines are you into? And I'm like, well, I think I'm really into these Louis Dresner wines.
Oh, nice.
And apparently I said the right thing, because him and Joe Dresner were best friends, and Denise Louis, and that was the big wine fair, that it was all the Louis Dresner growers that when I went to their wine fair, it was all Louis Dresner growers. But I wasn't putting it together completely that there was like an aesthetic, a movement, that I didn't know that there was natural wine, right? Yeah. And then that was my first interview, I guess. Because I think they didn't like interviewing people. I think he was like, yeah, I think he's pretty good. Let's have him come in for a second interview. So I come in for a second interview, and I was like, God, that guy, I don't know why they're interviewing me again. I felt like that guy hated me, he was so aloof. And the other owner, Jamie Wolf, was like, come here, come, we're tasting right now. And I was like, I thought I was here for an interview. And they just went in the back room, and it was like the rep from a distributor. This other guy used to work for work with Lyle Fass, tasting and spitting, and Lyle's just aggressively talking about every wine. I know, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, what the hell's going on here,
Did they have you taste them?
I tasted with them, and I spit like real awkwardly, into this big sink in the back room.
Because it wasn't.
And then I
something
was
that
just
you were...
like, they're like, when can you come back? When can you start? And I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't even get an interview here. It's like, I guess they just liked me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I did not have enough experience. I didn't know how to say a lot of the word, a lot of the French words I didn't know very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, within 6 months they gave me a trip to Burgundy in Austria.
Oh shit!
And they made me a buyer.
Whoa!
Of Spain.
Damn.
Yeah. So, and then I went to Spain too. And then that was it. I was hooked.
So, is this when you start putting the connection together that wine can also sort of fit into this, what we were talking about earlier, this political, ethical, moral framework?
No. I didn't put the two together.
Not at this point.
No.
When was that?
Well, like at Chamber Street, we were like bringing cases of wine to like the Occupy people. 5 years before that, I was basically like an Occupy person, but I was not involved. I didn't, one of my favorite writers is David Graeber. He was out there in the park with all those people, but I was not in that. I was in the zone of being a buyer in New York City.
Yep.
I also had 2 jobs. I always kept a coffee shop job, or I had a som job. I had a couple som jobs. I happened to work in some restaurants with some real luminaries, some phenomenal sommeliers, and so I was just getting experience, and I was just into that. I got a girlfriend, and then I was like, who became my wife, and like, it just, I was in that world. I didn't start to put the two together until the political obsession kind of like came back into me. And then I started to try to figure out ways that we can live more authentically. Like if you're vaguely leftist, or you want, more connectivity, collectivity, these kinds of, more sort of lefty ideas of community and life, how can we achieve that through our wine? Through wine. Wine is primordial. It's probably damn near as old as humanity. People have been fermenting things, trying to get drunk, testing things like, oh, it makes me feel that way, or whatever. And I think wine is associated with bourgeois privilege, which rightly so it is. But I think where wine is really interesting is that it brings people together. It complements food. It's good shit. I want everybody to have good shit. I don't think good shit should just be for me and my friends, or for rich people, or people that can afford to go to a restaurant or buy, that $50 bottle of Jura, or they're more expensive now, I think what we do a lot is we build a community around this, and then it becomes a very mutually driven culture where it's like the chef, the servers, the people in the restaurants and the retail shops, we create a synergy between them, and we create a community within that, and it becomes a very mutually beneficial business where it's like we all get to have the good stuff. We work hard, we help each other. Our jobs as salespeople is really to help those people on the ground in retail and wine, and in the restaurants, and like we should function as an extension of them, because they're the people on the ground actually doing the hard work. The distributors do harder work than the importers.
Yeah, but then the people that are on the floor do harder work than I do.
Right. I don't want it to be like a hierarchy. I'm anti-hierarchical.
No.
So that's, but at the same time, it's sort of this. It becomes this sort of natural kind of like, you're really good at selling wine on the streets. I'm really good at being an importer. And so I'm happy. I'm blessed. I'm privileged to find my niche and to have a life. I've lived a life. I've been, and I recognize that as an extreme privilege. But in my heart, I'm still like, I just want to be with the people.
Yeah.
And that's where I am the most comfortable at JPS, is not on my computer every day doing spreadsheets and doing allocations and whatever it is I do every day, and like shaking distributors down for orders. It's being in the restaurant, doing the takeovers, the features, the knowing who the busboy is, knowing, because I know I have influence over these people. I have knowledge that maybe they haven't explored yet. I can share it with them. I may be able to enrich their lives, help them in their everyday life, enjoy what they do, feeling like I do this and it's benefited me. It's, and having them around me and me around them, that kind of thing, and that mutually beneficial thing. There's a strain of anarchist thought called mutualism, developed by Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the great French philosopher. So I take a lot of that attitude, that ethos that you talk about, and I try to be as egalitarian as I possibly can be. I never want to be like lord my esoteric knowledge over people that don't. I want to share that. I want more people to just be like, wow, this is cool. It's geography, it's geology, it's culture, it's travel,
history.
It's history. It's a way to explore the world and to get by in a world that can be pretty difficult, so.
Yeah. You are unapologetically yourself. I think I maybe said this earlier. It's one thing that I noticed about you the very first time that I met you, and then have grown to really respect as time has gone on. Is that something that you learned? Is that something that, or has that always been you? You're like, because I feel like you have this like, fuck all y'all, I'm gonna do me mentality that's super refreshing. But for someone that has a hard time doing that, and I'm kind of a people pleaser at times, I look at it and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how do you even live in that space, It gives me anxiety.
It's my grandfather, probably.
Your grandfather?
Yeah, Del Millard. He was like this extreme working class guy. He wore red pocket t-shirts, scuffed up jeans, big white shoes, had a crew cut, like called himself Super Del. My dad is like, your grandfather would do work that nobody else would do. He could build anything. He had that sort of working class hero, all American, tough guy mentality. You live life with force, and you don't fucking care what anybody else thinks. I'm Del Millard. I work harder than anybody else. That was his mentality. I'm not saying I have that. Like, I have an equal parts slacker and hardworking mentality. I'm scared as fuck of being broke, which is partially why I'm not probably more radical in my everyday life. But I spent probably more time with that man, as much time with that man as anybody, besides my dad, Rick Barnes, who's like, the best dude. Just the example of these men. Yeah. My dad was a hardworking, also bootstrapping guy that came from the farm. Both of them came from farm work, did manufacturing, my grandfather was a union man, worked in heavy equipment operating, and he also always had like 15 jobs, and
hustling.
Did side hustles. He worked in the union, but he also had side hustles. He would do work on the weekends for people. He would always be out there, but he was never a flashy guy. My grandmother also was like the angel of my world. I just had strong personalities that modeled that, I think, and it was just a different time. Like the 80s is like, it was a tougher time. I spent a lot of all my time outside on my bicycle. I'm, with my friends, and I grew up in a town where a town of bullies, man. Like if, you're caught in the wrong place, man, look out. You might get punched. You didn't ask for it. You're just
Yeah.
gonna get it, you know. And I grew up with that kind of like I had to poke my chest out a lot, and I wasn't like a tough guy kid. I don't want to, you know, I wasn't like into the physical confrontation thing.
Yeah.
But you end up in a lot of talking shit and having to defend yourself and make a case why you shouldn't get your ass kicked that day, you know, that kind of thing. And like, you know, that's how I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have another question for you.
okay.
Wait. Because we already talked about this. Oh, here. This is a question that I've been asking people. And actually, I'm curious to ask you this.
Okay.
Why is champagne so fucking good?
Champagne is so fucking good because the growers have taken over the category. You know, starting with, you know, Terry Teese and the Grower Champagne portfolio when he brought those wines. Of course, there are other people bringing grower champagnes as well. But there was this cohesion to what Terry Teese did and how he brought that to America, and people got very, you know, really changed the game for champagne in America.
See, now,
and
this is interesting.
And then Champagne's like, it's got the similar story to a lot of other wine regions, right? Where big producers end up dominating the production. The wines get dumbed down with sugar and manipulations, and you lose a lot of terroir. And the terroir is inescapable. Even if you spoof the hell out of the wine, the terroir will be there. If your Syrah grown on granite, it will come out at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can try really hard to make it taste like California Syrah or whatever, you know? But the chalky soils, the climate is, you know, inevitably going to express itself in a champagne. So even mid or mediocre champagne is still like, still champagne, and it still shows that. But the wave after, at least I'm using Terry Teese, an importer of in America, who retired some years ago, but his portfolio is been carried on by the Skurnik wines. And then there's this wave after that, right? And the growers that were like, we're going to reduce dosage, or we're just going to eliminate it altogether. Mm-hmm. And they start focusing on really intense organic farming, whether it's regenerative, biodynamic, producers like George Laval, who think the wine is made in the vineyard. Even though champagne is a highly processed wine, it's a process-oriented wine. Mm-hmm. But if you start with the mindset, I want a lot of the flavor in this wine to come from the grapes in the vineyard and that vintage, and that's how you work every year. You bust your ass working organically. It's very hard to be organic in Champagne. A lot of disease pressure, a lot of humidity. It's hard. It's a hard place to be organic, but people figure it out over time, and the wines have just become more special and more niche, but the quality in that region is extraordinary now. Mm-hmm. It really truly lives up to the prices, and it has a lot to do. I mean, you just have producers that have broken through into styles that are undeniably innovative and singular, and I believe that singularity is what drives wine, really. That you break through in this, producers like in the Loire. Pierre Breton was the first guy. Pierre and Catherine Breton put on the first natural wine fair, right? And having that hive mind of people being in the same room from different regions, the Loire and Beaujolais and the Rhone and everybody interacting, they start this hive mind thing, and then quality goes way up. Mm-hmm. They say, "What are you doing? You use that practice in the vineyard? Oh, you don't." They start talking about how a prune, and start getting into very technical ways of how wine is produced. And these little changes, these little subtle changes, can make huge results. Whether it's pre-fermentation sulfur or whatever it is, you know. So I think just champagne is, you know, there's more grower champagnes than you can even count or name now, you know. But certainly Kermit Lynch is the pioneer of what we do in a lot of ways. And before him, Frank Schumacher, Becky Wasserman, you know, these are our elders who were exploring, you know, particularly in that case, France, right? But then beyond that, you know, Leonard Lucasio, who started Winebow in Italy. You know, at one point, Winebow had every great Italian producer, you know, like, and in Spain, it was Jorge Ordonez, you know, had every great Spanish producer, you know, and, you know, these importers, you know, we live in America. We live in this 3-tier system. The importers have their own kind of celebrity, and their response. Of course, the growers are ultimately responsible for the wines, but someone has to find them and bring and actually have the cojones to import them, right? To, you know, and that, I think when Frank Schumacher and Becky and Kermit were all starting, like, there was no certainty that this was going to work.
Definitely not.
You know, there, even for us, you know, with Jose Pastor selections, you know, Jose started to believe in this sort of small grower producer thing before it certainly was a thing in Spain. And he, you know, kind of blazed a trail for Spanish wine, you know, and there are people before us that did that. So, but maybe Paul Barra, maybe Agliorier. I personally, well, I know both producers, but I have a little more Agli, a little more partisan. I think those wines are like beyond, you know, beyond insanely good. You know, I mean, they're really singular wines.
Yeah, I've filmed or whatever, recorded a couple of these episodes, and every one so far we've talked about Egli. I think I might have just unintentionally done it.
I mean, when you represent a winery like that, you're proud of it. You know, it's a reference point for you because, you know, like I said, I personally believe that it's innovation and, you know, the progressive producers that actually give names to wine regions.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and I think Agliorier is can make a very strong case for mostly Pinot Noir, right? So yeah, he's one of those people.
Hell yeah. What the fuck is mouse?
It's not in this wine.
I have another what the fuck. Or wait,
mouse.
I have two more. What the
mouse
fuck.
Mouse is a retronasal taste, and it has a lot to do with the pH of the wine and also of the person that's drinking its mouth, saliva. So, you know, 1 out of 4 people.
There's a genetic predisposition for mouse?
Don't taste mouse. I know people can't taste mouse. Mouse is a flaw, and to me it's a mortal flaw, that oftentimes is found in wines with no or little sulfites added. And it's extraordinarily hard to predict. Even the growers don't entirely understand it. I have a lot of theories around it, but
this one I want to hear.
It's almost damn near, almost not every 0.0 wine that's early release 0.0 wine gets mousy after a certain amount of time open. It seems to be a response to oxidation, and wines that are particularly fragile can get mousy. Some of those wines can be the best wines you've ever drank in your life for about 45 minutes. Because they go down so fast.
Burn bright. They
burn bright and burn out fast.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think they can work by the bottle in, in a wine bar where there's charcuterie and friends and talking and stuff like that. But if you're looking to have, you know, drink a couple glasses, throw the bottle in the fridge, and go back to it the next day, you're gonna you might have some mouse. It's up to the producers if they want to have that as a part of their wine, potentially, and oftentimes around 20 parts of sulfur added can make it go away. Sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time it does. But there are a lot of 0.0 zealots that don't want any sulfur in their wines because they think it changes the character of the wine.
Okay, so this is a question that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
There is a sort of like a dogmatic and a dogmatism, I suppose, is how you would say it, but like of these 0.0 producers that perhaps are making a wine dogmatically, but at the cost of the wine. Like, how do you handle that if you're like in a sales pitch, or how do you even handle that to me right now? This is something that I'm struggling with as well, because I'm like, I understand being dogmatic and super principled about it, and if this is your life vision, then I fucking live out here. Who the fuck am I to say that what you're doing is incorrect? But then I drink the wine and I'm like, this could have used a little bit of sulfur, just a bit to help it out so that I can enjoy what you created,
The philosophy of the 0.0 grower is to capture the energy of the vintage and the grapes in this particular place and time where the acidity is super bright and crunchy and the fruit flavors are just there. They don't want to macerate too much. When you macerate, you get more tannins and it protects the wine. But if you macerate too much, the wine can taste a little heavy. Where the wine might taste a little heavy might prevent that wine from being mousy. But they want that electricity of that moment to come through in the wine. Mouse can appear when you bottle wine, and it can go away in the bottle. There are more and more, I should say, 0.0 growers that are holding their wines for a year before they ship. Most of these producers are very, very small and do not have the luxury of holding wine. They need to turn over the wine so they can continue to buy bottles, buy labels, pay themselves, however they pay themselves. And so there's a lot of pressure to get wine out into the market quickly, right? And so
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's almost like... Yeah. There's financial pressure on their part.
Yeah.
And on your part to get it here to make a sale, and on my part to make a sale here.
Right. We pay them. A lot of the small producers, we have to, they need money. We oftentimes pay these producers up front before they even make the wine.
Yeah.
My boss, Jose Pastor, has financed a lot of projects.
Yeah.
And some importers can do that, some can't. But
it's like this cultural clash, though, of like, to sell wine in America, we got to get it here, get it fast, sell it quick, because I'm working on sales numbers, you're working on sales numbers, and more.
Yeah, but it's the short-sighted mentality is somebody's got to pay for it, right? Like, in a way.
Right.
So, what we try to do is like, okay, well, we work with 450 SKUs or 500 SKUs or whatever we have at JPS.
Yeah.
I have maybe at any given time somewhere in between 200 and 250 SKUs in stock, wines. In stock, get individual wines in stock at any given time. A wine going out is a sale, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So, we taste a lot. We sell direct in New York, so as soon as wines land, we have people on the ground tasting, talking about them. We know which wines are like super fire. Some wines need time. Even wines without added, even beyond 0.0 wines, real wine is living, and can react differently to travel and being on the water. We talk objectively amongst ourselves, and we create priorities. We're gonna focus on these wines because we think they're great, and there's always some customers for 0-0 wines that know the producers, right? Like the accounts that want Oriol Artigas because they know Oriol Artigas, and they also know that there might be some risk for mouse, but they might get the wine and be like, okay, I'm gonna drink a bottle with my friends, we're gonna decide, let's just sit on this for a while. You're a wine bar on the ground, we're gonna focus on it. So there's a lot of, there are masters in our business that know how to handle these wines. Like Jorge Riera in New York at La Roque and Franchette and Voudevore. He knows how to handle these wines. It's getting experience and using our experience to make sure that we're nurturing and not like forcing wine. Like, we're not saying, buy this, buy this, buy this.
Yeah.
We want our best feet to go forward, and we want to represent the growers the best.
Yep.
And we represent their vision. And, the beauty of natural wine is that it's not homogenous. It's not perfect. It's not even very capitalism and natural wine don't really.
That's what I'm saying.
Capitalism is about growth.
Yeah.
Always growth.
Yeah.
And you can't make, even in the fine wine world, someone who works a 4-hectare domain and it's domain bottled, you can't expect him to grow every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what we do is very finite, very handheld, very specific to a place, a vintage. Nature oftentimes gives. I mean, man is involved, but some regions they can't control if mildew destroys their whole vintage because they don't use, fungicides. They refuse to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the risk that they take. There's a lot of risk in everything that we do. And that's not normal. This is not normal capitalist economics.
It doesn't fit the capitalist structure.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's partially why I love it.
Yeah.
If you want to bridge the gap
rebellious.
there, it's very rebellious. I mean, natural wine is a rebellion against industrial wine, period.
Mm-hmm.
And natural wine comes from Beaujolais. That's where the ethos comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It was articulated by Jules Chauvet. It was the Gang of Four, plus there's a couple of other people that don't get to call themselves Gang of Four, but they're also part of that movement in the Beaujolais. Yvan Matras, these George Decombe, these producers.
Is Chateau Tivin in there? Or no,
they're classic Beaujolais.
Okay,
producers.
all right.
I don't consider them natural.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I mean, they're great wines, and they're,
yeah.
if you want to know what Beaujolais is supposed to taste like, drink Chateau Tivin.
I just always...
But it's Marcel Lapierre, it's Jean Foillard, it's Guy Breton, and it's Jean-Paul Thevenet. Gang of Four, okay? And then in the Loire, it was Thierry Pousselat, who worked with Foillard, and it was the Bretons that brought this kind of ethos into the Loire Valley, and the Loire Valley became the main place for natural wine, really.
I would think, too, a relatively difficult place to grow grapes and be organic, especially towards the coast.
Right.
Like, so humid and damp.
No, Muscadet, it's so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This has given me a lot of perspective, man, honestly, because I'm starting to realize that maybe with all of the sales pressure that we all feel, you feel, I feel, and then people that are running a wine shop feel, it's difficult to pitch something to somebody and you're like, sit on this for a year and a half, because that's what this juice requires. You're going to have to sit on this. But I'm afraid that the pressures that we both feel because of the capitalist structure that we work within, and we always have to show relatively stable or consistent sales numbers and growth, it's like we pump out, and then you said earlier someone's got to pay for it. Now the consumer has to pay for it because you
want consumers to like what you do, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then if you pump out a wine that's not ready yet because we're all feeling pressure, financial pressure, then someone goes home and drinks a bottle and it's not ready, and we all knew it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, as salespeople, our jobs is to bridge the gap between the grower and the consumer, right? On a retail level, at Chambers Street Wines is an example. Sometimes we don't know the customer, right? We knew most of our customers. Most of our customers were regular customers. They were there for a reason. Either they live in the neighborhood, they buy the $12. We also sold safe, inexpensive wines for the everyday person.
Yeah.
David Lilly believed in that. He believed that there should be wine available for anybody, regardless of your, you could buy an $8 La Vieille Ferme Rouge, which is definitively not natural wine. But 95% of our shelves were filled with small production, natural, organic, or biodynamic wines. And organic and biodynamic, meaning they use some sulfur, maybe, like versus the natural category, because I think there's a sulfur threshold for natural.
This is one of my questions. Where do you draw that line?
40 parts.
40? Okay.
Yeah. For whites, maybe a little less for reds. 40 and 30 or 50 and 40. People go up, but once you get over 50, it's like, oh, hell no. That's safe wine territory. In Burgundy, they like to be very judicious, and most Burgundy producers use around 60 parts. It's still a thoughtful way of making wine, but in my opinion, you lose vivacity and energy once you go above 30 or 40 parts. In my opinion. And that was our standards at Chambers Street. But anyways, what I was saying is, if there's a customer that we don't know comes to a counter with a wine that we're like, hey, how'd you come upon this one?
Like spoof juice?
Yeah, no. They'll be like, oh, I just like the label. And they're like, well, this one, it's a little funky. You kind of chalked them in. Like, what were you looking for? What do you like? And try to get. Sometimes they wouldn't want to have that conversation. Most of the time they'd be like, well, I like, Merlot, or I like Syrah, or I like Pinot Grigio, or whatever. But maybe they didn't. Most people, I don't think, go into retail stores wanting to talk to a sales associate. They feel like they're going to be talked into something more expensive, that they're going to get hustled or something. But that's not what the relationship should be. The relationship should be that, as if you're in a sales floor, like Susan's is the closest example to a Chambers Street Wines. You have a lot of very good wine people there that have experience, that know about wine and know how to recommend wine and help people. To me, that relationship is crucial, and it's a beautiful relationship. I mean, it's a it's a commodified, kind of, there's money exchange,
of course,
but it also can function as a very good, social relationship, and you can change people's lives. I knew dudes that only drank Napa Cabernet when they walked into Chambers Street, and then left. When I left, they only drank Jura Chardonnay.
Whoa,
I mean, it's you couldn't get more different. That's
Opposite
a true story.
Yeah.
Wine is so mysterious. People think they know, and they don't really know. Wine is just there's so many surprises.
Well, dude, that's why I'm doing this. I don't think people get wine just straight up fundamentally. Not even saying that I do, but just saying I think people are afraid of it. I think people they don't know how to approach it. But I'm sometimes people think too much about it. At the end of the day, you're just sitting.
It's
on
about
deck.
Enjoyment.
Yes, exactly. Whether or not
it's
you
a pleasure. Wine is supposed to give pleasure. It's not meant to be this is a thing about spoof wines. Spoof wines are designed to give pleasure, but I think a lot of people used to like the big spoof wines because they exert power over you.
They're
alcohol,
insanely intense,
flavor, right? And I think a lot of American consumers thought that wine should exert power. It should have power of me, oh man,
slap me in the face.
Yeah, hit me real good, and it's and the natural wine people are no, we want wine to be harmonious. We want you to drink it. You want it to feel good, digestible. You want to drink it. You don't want to get hammered. You want to enjoy your meal, enjoy your company with your friends, and this is what living a good life is like. So we're just setting an example. We're trying to set an example, right, of what a good life. This is living the good life. Some people can obtain it. Many people cannot. We need to figure out how to make it more obtainable to anyone that might find this stuff delicious and interesting, and that they would want it part of their lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And oftentimes we find that through working in the industry. We might not have the privilege to be able to go out and buy a bottle of wine every night. And I tell people that's not the point of this. No. For me, the point of wine is not drinking it every night with dinner. That's a nice idea. Most people cannot afford that. But chipping in, going in on a bottle, or buying a bottle of special occasion, getting with 5 or 6 homies, 8 or 10 homies, bringing a bunch of bottles, opening wine, getting a bunch of cheese and charcuterie or whatever it is, making a big pot of something, a one-pot meal type thing, and a salad, and getting smashed with your friends.
Put it on the table and let's hang out.
That's the magic of this shit.
100%. I'll even go a step further, too. Every now and then, you can have it with dinner, but be intentional about it. Like, I love those nights where I'm like, what do I want to drink? And then you figure out what to cook from the bottle, or even vice versa. You're like, I want to make a roast chicken tonight. What should I... And just have at least maybe one night a week where there's intentionality, and you're like, I'm going to have a roast chicken and open this bottle of Pinot Noir, and it's going to be fucking delicious.
I used to work in jobs just specifically so I could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I could... pair the roast chicken with Beaujolais, pair the Sancerre with goat cheese, pair the port with, Stilton. There's still that food and wine pairing thing that is magical, and it creates that third flavor thing that, what Alianico does with Calabrian chilies. There's just a lot of different kinds, or ragu, like that light bulb goes off, and you're like, man, it's primordial, and kind of like it makes you feel, it's like almost like a sexual,
Of course,
like
dude.
It's like it gets you there.
I don't know. I get really weird about it sometimes, because like sometimes I get a little stoned. We might have to edit this out, but sometimes I'll get a little stoned, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna sound weird, and I've never actually said it publicly, but sometimes I feel like the wine is communicating. Like there's some relationship and communication happening that it feels bizarre to me. Like I'll have a bottle of wine, and the wine will change throughout the course of the night, and it like is doing something on my palate. And there's this, I keep going back to this thought of like, people think like you sit with a wine and then by the second glass the wine's opened up, but I think sometimes it's the other way around, where it's like we open up to the wine.
Yeah, for sure.
It's crazy to me, man.
Yeah,
it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
Would you? Here's a would you rather. That has nothing to do with reduction.
Okay.
Would you rather, like, when you like wake up in the middle of the night and you can't really see, but you need to go take a leak, and then you stub your pinky toe on whatever it is?
It's horrible.
Would you rather do that or drink a bottle of...
I'd probably rather stub my toe.
See,
honestly, I have a really hard time with spoof wine. I really do. I can drink cheap beer.
High Life?
Whatever.
Yeah.
PBR, High Life, whatever. I like Pilsner, light lagers are my favorite beers anyways.
Yeah.
And winemakers drink more beer than anybody I know.
Yeah. And honestly, too, at the end of like a blind tasting group or
or working all day around wine, you just want a beer.
The last thing you want is another glass of wine.
But I'm not like, oh, I'm on an airplane, I'm like, give me the red wine, please. Like, no, I want the Dewar's and soda.
Yeah.
I'm not like so into wine that I have to drink wine with everything. Some people are like that, and that's fine. That's for them. If they like, spoofy supermarket wine where the wine's like standardized, and I don't know. I have a really hard time like, like I can drink bad like English tea versus bad coffee, because I also really like good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting better. As I get older, I'm getting less dogmatic and less of like, oh, I'm such a tastemaker kind of guy or whatever. Or just like I have my principles, and like this just offends me, and there's a lot of that's tied into ego, right? And you just lose some of that when you get older.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So-
interesting. Yeah, I love shitty beer. It's like one of my favorite things.
I mean, sometimes you just want refreshing shittiness.
Yep. I ask everybody the same 3 questions at the end of the show.
Okay.
Do you have one aha moment bottle that you can remember as I was going through life and I thought wine was one thing, and then I had this bottle and it made me realize that wine is something way more?
I mean, there's been a bunch. I mentioned some of them, right? Like those barista bottles, way back. But I would say like there's the early stuff. There's the Cab Francs. Claire Roche Blanche is my all-time favorite winery. They no longer exist. But when I first moved to New York, I used to frequent Marlowe and Sons a lot. And I used to drink the Claire Roche Blanche Cab Franc quite a bit. Or the Cabernet. It was a blend of Cab Franc and Cab Sauv. But they also made a wine called La Pont Rouge, which was Pinot d'Anis. And that just like... that wine just made me insane, Like, that was a huge wine for me. Pinot d'Anis from the Loire, the spiciness, the rusticity. It's not even a word, but it is now. But
Rusticity? Yeah,
Maybe-
people say it
people say
in the
it.
wine world.
They should. It's a word. Put it in the dictionary. Fuck everyone.
Yeah.
And then, like, after that, I want to say something like Els Jalapens, which was this, and still is. I think the project is carried on by Gloria and her daughter. But this was this wine from Spain that came from the Penedès region and was produced with Sumol and Garnacha, maybe like 60, 70, 80% Sumol and the balance Garnacha. And it was really one of the first natural wines I ever had from Spain. And the wine was made it was made in amphoras, and like they only used a little bit of sulfur at the bottling, but everything before that was like naked wine, and that wine was so profound to me. Sumol now is becoming more of a household grape for Catalan wine, and it should be. It's one of the great red wines of Spain, and also Xarel·lo for whites. But their wine, was just... that's when I knew it was possible, Because when I first started buying Spanish wine, there wasn't any natural wine made in Spain. Very little.
Not even made?
There were... I could tell you the pioneering producers. There were a few, Lariano Ceres, Alfredo Maestro, Joan Ramon Escoda, Els Jalapens. There were maybe 6, 7, 8 producers in the mid to late aughts.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that Els Jalapens wine was just like... I lived for that wine in a lot of ways. Every release, every year was like this event, and I put people on it. And it was it's an expensive wine.
Yeah.
It was a special wine, So I put that.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Imported by Jenny and Francois.
Yeah, I've actually never had it. It's making me realize
It's a black bottle. It's a dark bottle with they hand paint a little symbol on each, and they change it every year.
Okay.
It's Gloria and Bertha. Amazing people.
Do Paul and Martha get any of it?
I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
they've gotten it once.
Okay. What's your desert island varietal?
Oh.
I should have sent
Chardonnay.
Okay, why?
The Jura.
Okay.
Cool climate Chardonnay is I like native. Like I mentioned, I like Palomino. I like Sauvignon. I like grape varieties that tend to be kind of, not a lot of character on their own. Like I didn't say Sauvignon Blanc or Muscatel, like very expressive varieties. But definitely white wine. Definitely, I would say Chardonnay because of its ability to create just beautiful wines in a variety of climates. And, I think my desert island region, maybe, there's a few, Galicia, Jura, Piedmont, it can, whatever, but.
Not Loire.
Yeah, I mean, Loire is kind of like a whole world, right?
Right, yeah, for sure.
It's almost like, gosh, I mean, Sancerre can almost feel as far apart from Muscadet as, but,
Yeah,
it probably is the Loire, but,
But you're saying Jura. You're thinking maybe Jura.
Oh, yeah, sure, Chardonnay,
Yeah.
Sauvignon. Yeah.
And also, if you choose Chardonnay, you open yourself up to a boatload of champagne as well. So.
Yeah, but even like weird, cool climate Chardonnay from the False or Oregon Chardonnay,
Yep,
stuff
100%.
from Walter Scott and Martin Woods, and there's just it's just if you can bring out the lean mineral side of the grape, it's a phenomenal grape variety.
Yeah, I tasted through all the 22s. From no, it would have been 22s from Evan at Martin Woods. When I was there, it took me going out there to taste it, but there's like, minerality, but then also this great salinity.
Those are the soils, and I think the ability for Chardonnay to transmit soil character and balance the solar, right? Because terroir is tension between sun, wind, soil type, the way water moves through the soil. All this stuff creates wine for what it is. Any little subtle change from 1 year, if you get a lot of rain, it's going to show in the wine. There might be a touch of freshness, right? A rain before the vintage, right? There's always a little more freshness in the wine and vivacity. So I think Chardonnay is just like one of those grapes that can just very precisely express where it comes from.
100%.
It's also heavily manipulated.
Yes. Yeah.
Heavily manipulated. So.
Which is an interesting choice for you. I love that you chose Chardonnay, but it is a heavily manipulated varietal.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this.
It's been nice to talk.
Yeah, I appreciate you. What's one piece of advice that you, right now, if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Oh.
Just saw your life flash in your eyes.
If I would have... I think we all are a little neurodivergent, right? Whether it's OCD or, whatever, I think I would have sought more mental health help younger, because once I realized that I had this ADHD thing going on, and explained a lot of my life to me. If I had more cognizance that, I probably would have taken some slightly better directions when I was younger, and my path would have maybe happened a little sooner. But the ADHD gave me a lot of curiosity and I was very exploratory. I found my way.
Yeah.
And then I stayed on a path, and I stayed in that lane. And that's what another advice that I would give to people. It's one of the things that kind of sucks about capitalism is that, I was able to navigate this system that I think is kind of shitty, simply by being a specialist, staying in my lane. Nobody wanted to do Spanish wine at Chamber Street Wine, so I did it. And then I made it. The things I envisioned in my head that wasn't happening in Spanish wine now happens. It was like a manifesting kind of thing. If you stay in your lane and you stick to it, stick to your guns, even when it's not paying off. Just stay there, do it, dig it, go deep, you'll find your people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you also like open your heart, you know, and like open yourself up to things happening while staying in your lane, then I think you're golden.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's not all about opportunity. It's just about like, you know, I found myself, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so I had a strong sense of self, but like I really spent a lot of time floundering in my 20s trying to figure it out. And I think the mental health thing, understanding neurodivergence and like some of my challenges a little bit younger would have been healthier for me.
Yeah.
You know, I would have been healthier in my life.
Oh, fuck. That's great advice, dude.
So,
Thanks, buddy. Can I give you a
got
hug?
it. Yeah. Love you, man.
Love you too. Thank you.